If you ever close your eyes and try to imagine a place that feels older than memory, a place where the air itself seems to whisper stories, then you're getting close to the world of the ancient Maya. Their home was not just land. It was a whole mood, a whole atmosphere. Thick, warm, green, and alive. Tonight we're stepping into that world. So, get comfortable, breathe in, breathe out, and let's walk slowly into the eternal forests of Mesoamerica, where the Maya civilization first began to rise. The world of the Maya didn't look anything like the modern cities we know today. There were no highways, no glowing phone screens, no coffee shops on every corner, sadly. Instead, picture this endless jungles stretching out like a giant green ocean, trees so tall they almost touch the clouds, vines curling down like nature's own curtains, the smell of wet earth, the sound of birds you've never heard before, and insects who seem way too excited about life. At night, the jungle shifts. Mist drifts between the trees. The air cools just a little. The moon reflects inside deep blue cenotes, those natural water-filled sinkholes the Maya considered sacred. The water is so still it looks like a portal to another world. And who knows, maybe the Maya thought it was. This is Mesoamerica, a land full of stories, secrets, and ancient footsteps. The geography of the Maya world was diverse, dramatic, and honestly, a bit confusing if you don't have a map. So, let's take a slow tour, like we're floating gently over the landscape. To the north, imagine the Yucatan Peninsula. It's flat, warm, and covered in forests, like someone rolled out a giant green carpet. No big rivers flow there, which is weird, so people relied on those cenotes. Deep, cool pools hidden in the limestone. They weren't just water sources. They were spiritual gateways. Move south into what is now Guatemala, and the land changes. Suddenly you have highlands rising like ancient giants, misty mountains, volcanoes standing proud, some quiet, some not so quiet. The air is cooler here. The mornings are crisp, and the views stretch for miles. Then there's Belize, lush, humid, and full of wildlife. A place where you can walk 10 steps and already feel lost, but like a good kind of lost. The kind you write poetry about. And to the southwest, Honduras adds even more variety, with both tropical forests and hilly ranges that seem to breathe under the clouds. All of these regions together formed the stage where the Maya civilization would grow. But long before pyramids and kings, there were small families, small villages, and small ideas that would one day become something huge. The first humans settled in these places around 2000 to 1500 BCE. That's more than 3,500 years ago. To put that into perspective, this is when woolly mammoths were already extinct, but the pyramids in Egypt were still pretty young. Humans love building pyramids, apparently. These early Maya weren't much different from us. In one simple way, they needed food. And the land around them was generous if you treated it right. They grew maize, corn, the sacred food of the Maya. They also grew squash beans, cacao, and cotton. So yes, technically the Maya had chocolate long before anyone else. Over time, these early villages grew. People learned to shape stone into tools, pottery into art, and simple farms into organized communities. The jungle didn't scare them. It was their partner, their teacher, their home. But here's something important. The Maya civilization was never one big empire with one boss telling everyone what to do. Nope. The Maya were more like a very large family, where each cousin lived in their own house, with their own rules, and occasionally argued with the other cousins. Each city-state, like Tikal, Calakmul, or Palenque, was independent. They had their own kings, their own traditions, and their own style of showing off. So when we say Maya civilization, we mean a whole collection of cultures that shared beliefs, languages, and ways of life, but they weren't one united kingdom. It was more like a huge network of communities, all scattered through the forests, mountains, and coasts, each city shining like its own star in a very busy night sky. Now, imagine walking into this world as the sun rises. The forest floor glows with golden light. Birds call out like morning alarm clocks, except you can't hit snooze. Smoke curls from huts where families wake and begin their day. Children chase each other between trees. Farmers step out to tend their maize fields. And in the distance, tiny ceremonial platforms rise from the forest, made from stone and earth. Nothing huge yet. But these are the early foundations of what would become iconic pyramids centuries later. The land didn't just influence Maya life. It shaped every part of their identity. The rivers were seen as pathways to the underworld. Caves were sacred places where humans could speak with gods. The jungle itself was a living spirit, full of power and danger. It wasn't simply nature. It was alive, watching, listening. Every sunset, every storm, every season held meaning. You can almost picture an early Maya family sitting outside their home, watching fireflies blink through the dusk. Maybe someone plays a simple instrument. Maybe someone cracks a joke. Maybe someone complains about mosquitoes. Yes, even ancient civilizations probably hated mosquitoes. As the stars appear, they don't just sparkle, they tell stories. The Maya looked to the sky like it was a giant calendar. They tracked the movements of planets long before telescopes were even a dream. But for now, at the beginning, their knowledge was growing slowly, like a seed under soil, waiting to become a towering tree. Civilizations don't rise overnight. They rise through patience, mistakes, experiments, and dreams. And in these early centuries, the Maya were building the quiet foundation of something extraordinary. Something that would one day stretch across hundreds of cities, thousands of years, and millions of lives. Their journey was just beginning. The forests around them whispered the promise of greatness, and the land, those eternal forests, watched it all unfold. This is where the story starts, a world shaped by nature, guided by stars, and carried forward by people who believed the land was sacred and alive. So as the night deepens and the jungle hums softly around us, we leave this first chapter with one simple thought. Before the Maya built temples that touched the sky, before they created calendars more accurate than our own, before they wrote stories in symbols carved on stone, they were people, living in forests, listening to the earth, and learning step by slow step how to build a civilization that would one day rise and eventually fall, but never be forgotten. Long before the Maya built huge pyramids or carved great stone monuments, they were farmers. Simple, patient farmers trying to make life work in the middle of thick forests. And honestly, the forests could be dramatic. Too much shade, too much humidity, too many bugs with attitude. But the Maya figured out how to survive, then how to thrive. It all started with maize, corn. Maize wasn't just food, it was destiny. The Maya believed humans were literally made from maize dough. Imagine being made from your lunch. Kind of poetic, kind of funny, but for the Maya, deeply sacred. They also grew squash, beans, cacao, and cotton. So yes, they basically invented the ancient version of a cozy cafe: corn, chocolate, and comfy cotton clothes. A complete package. Farmers cleared small patches of jungle using a slash and burn method. It sounds dramatic, but they were careful, respectful. The soil rested, then gave them harvests. And with food came stability, and with stability came growth. These small farming villages slowly turned into communities with structure. People learned to make stronger homes. They built storage areas. They created pottery, simple at first, then more artistic. Pottery wasn't just for cooking, it was for storytelling. Decorations, symbols, patterns. Even a clay cup has a little drama if you look close enough. As the villages grew, something else changed too: social hierarchy. Not everyone in society had the same job anymore. Some people farmed. Some crafted pottery. Some became spiritual guides. Some organized building projects. Some, well, probably just complained a lot. Every village has that one guy. And with more structure came the creation of the first stone platforms. These weren't giant pyramids yet. Think of them more like large stages or raised platforms, where leaders and spiritual guides could perform rituals. They were simple but important. Small steps toward the monumental cities that would come later. But what truly shaped early Maya life wasn't just farming or architecture. It was mythology. Their stories were the heartbeat of the civilization, and no story was more important than the one told in the Popol Vuh. A sacred text filled with creation tales, gods, magic, and two very dramatic heroes known as the hero twins. Now, imagine this story told beside a warm fire at night, with the jungle humming softly in the background. It begins long before humans existed. The world was quiet, empty, still. The gods tried to make humans a few times, but let's just say the first attempts were not great. Their first try, they made humans out of mud. Those humans fell apart like wet cookies. Soft, floppy, zero personality. The gods sighed and tried again. The second try, they made humans out of wood. And honestly, these wooden humans were kinda rude. No emotions, no respect, no gratitude. So the gods sent floods, storms, and honestly everything except customer service complaints. The wooden humans did not last. Finally, the gods tried a third time. This time, they used maize dough, white corn, yellow corn, red corn, all mixed into the first real humans. These humans had heart, spirit, gratitude, and the ability to worship. Success at last. The hero twins, Hunapiu and Exbalanque, play a big part too. Their story is long, magical, and full of twists, but in simple words, they outsmarted the lords of the underworld through courage, trickery, and teamwork. They weren't huge warriors. They were clever, agile, brave, and their story reminded the Maya that intelligence was just as important as strength. Told in a quiet, soft voice, these stories gave early Maya people comfort and a sense of purpose. They explained where humans came from, why rituals mattered, why maize was sacred, and why life and death were connected like night and day. These beliefs shaped everything. Religion for the Maya wasn't something separate. It was woven into daily life like threads in a woven cloth. They believed blood was sacred energy, not in a scary horror movie way, but in a symbolic, spiritual sense. A drop of blood was like a spark of life, something offered to the gods to show gratitude and maintain balance. Kings and nobles had bigger responsibilities here, performing rituals to keep the world in harmony. That brings us to one important point: kings weren't just rulers. They were divine intermediaries, bridge builders between humans and gods. People trusted them to read signs, guide rituals, talk to the spirits, and keep crops growing. So when early cities formed, they were built around ceremonial centers, places where the spiritual world and the human world met. Two of the earliest major centers were Nakbe and El Mirador. Imagine Nakbe around 1000 BCE, still small by later Maya standards, but already full of life. Dozens of structures rising from the forest floor, stone platforms, early pyramids starting to appear, people carrying clay pots, weaving cloth, preparing rituals, and trading goods along forest paths. Then there's El Mirador, a giant in the jungle. Even in the early days, it was impressive. Massive platforms, early temple structures, and a population growing fast. You can almost picture smoke rising gently from homes at sunset, children laughing, priests preparing ceremonies, and the sound of distant drums echoing softly across the trees. These early ceremonial centers were the seeds of something much larger. They showed ambition, vision, a deep sense of the sacred. People didn't build these places for fun. They built them because their beliefs told them the world needed balance, ritual, and connection to the divine. The Maya were becoming more than farmers. They were becoming architects, astronomers, storytellers, and spiritual thinkers. Their myths gave them identity. Their farms gave them strength. Their stone platforms gave them community. And their early cities gave them direction. Slowly, through centuries of growth, trial, and spiritual dedication, the Maya civilization began to rise. Not suddenly, not all at once, but quietly, steadily, much like a seed pushing through soil toward the sun. When the classic period of the Maya begins, around 250 CE, it's like someone slowly turns on a light in the jungle. Cities rise, kings step forward, knowledge blossoms, and the Maya world shifts from small villages and early centers to a full, glowing civilization. It's peaceful to imagine, yet grand at the same time. So, relax your shoulders, settle into your pillow, and drift with me into the golden age of the Maya. The classic Maya didn't just build cities. They grew them out of the jungle like green giants wearing stone crowns, using forest limestone, tons and tons of it. They created cities that blended with nature yet towered above it. You can almost picture workers shaping heavy blocks, lifting them with ropes, and sliding them into place under the warm sun. A slow rhythm of effort, a gentle heartbeat of civilization. This era gave birth to some of the greatest Maya city-states ever known: Tikal, with its tall temples that poked the sky; Calakmul, a rival city deep in the forest, proud and powerful; Palenque, elegant and artistic, famous for its beautiful palaces; Copan, filled with masterful statues and stela carved with stories. Each city had its own personality, like siblings in a big ancient family. Tikal was the tall, serious one. Calakmul was the ambitious one who wanted to win every argument. Palenque was the artistic cousin who always had good hair. and Copan was the scholar, quiet, thoughtful, and full of wisdom. These cities were not small. They were massive networks of temples, plazas, palaces, courtyards, and workshops, all built from stone pulled straight from the earth. The Maya shaped the landscape, but they also respected it. Temples aligned with sunrise or solstice, buildings placed to match star paths. Everything had meaning. Step pyramids climbed upward like giant staircases for the gods. Massive plazas opened like wide breathing spaces in the middle of dense forests, and stelae, tall stone pillars, stood proudly, carved with royal histories. These carvings were not simple doodles. They were detailed records of battles, birthdays, coronations, and cosmic events. Basically ancient stone social media, but with way more effort. And at the center of each city was a king. But he wasn't just any king. He was the Holy Lord, the bridge between gods and humans. When he walked through a plaza, people saw not just a man, but a symbol, an anchor holding the world in balance. But what made this era truly special wasn't just the buildings or the kings. It was the knowledge. The Maya mind grew sharper than ever. They invented a writing system so complex, so beautiful, that it took modern researchers decades to decode it. Hieroglyphic writing became the heart of Maya communication. Symbols stood for sounds, words, and ideas. A single glyph could represent Lord, mountain, or Jaga. They etched these glyphs on stone, painted them on pottery, and wrote them in folded bark books called codices. Imagine a Maya scribe sitting cross, legged with a paintbrush made from animal hair, dipping it into black or red pigment. Each stroke calm and careful, each page a quiet treasure. Then came math. The Maya were not just good at math, they were elite. And they did something incredible. Something only a few civilizations ever achieved. They invented the concept of zero. A shell-shaped symbol meant nothing, but also meant powerful placeholder. This one idea helped them track time, build calendars, and measure the universe. And speaking of calendars, the Maya basically became time wizards. They created several systems, each working together: the Zolkin, a 260-day sacred calendar; the Hab, a 365-day solar calendar; the Long Count, a system for tracking enormous spans of time. These calendars weren't guesswork. They were scientific and astonishingly accurate. The Maya tracked the cycles of the moon, planets, and stars with precision we still admire today. Their astronomer priests watched the sky at night, noting the movement of Venus, the rising of the sun, and the alignment of constellations. Imagine them standing on top of a temple, the night wind blowing gently, the stars glittering above like a cosmic map. But for all their intellect, the Maya were still regular people living regular lives, just in a very beautiful civilization. A typical day in a classic Maya city could include farmers walking to their fields at dawn, carrying tools made from stone and wood; artisans shaping jade into beads, carving shells, or painting pottery with swirling designs; traders moving along forest paths with bundles of obsidian blades, quetzal feathers, salt, fabrics, or cacao beans; astronomer priests consulting sky charts before rituals; children running through courtyards, giggling, probably causing trouble; women weaving colorful textiles, grinding maize into masa for tortillas; marketplaces buzzing with voices, laughter, and the smell of cooked food. Evenings were peaceful, fires burning softly, families sharing food, the stars shining overhead. The Maya world was busy, yes, but it also had a calm rhythm, guided by nature and tradition. Royal court life, though, was a different kind of calm. Picture a palace courtyard with smooth stone floors and soft shadows. Elite families in fine woven clothes, priests preparing incense, musicians playing drums and wooden flutes, dancers with feathered costumes spinning slowly as smoke rises into the air. Ceremonies filled the calendar, rituals to honor the gods, holidays tied to seasons, celebrations of kings' births and victories. One of the most important events was the ball game. Not a cute little game. A sacred match played on long stone courts by athletes who wore belts and knee pads. They used their hips to strike a heavy rubber ball. No hands allowed. It was part sport, part ritual, part entertainment. And the crowds loved it. Probably yelled things like, "Go! Go!" in ancient Maya. We don't know the exact words, but excitement sounds the same in every language. As the classic period grew stronger, the Maya world shimmered with creativity, ambition, and spiritual devotion. Cities competed, but they also learned from each other. Scholars studied the stars. Artisans experimented with new forms. Kings built taller temples. Scribes wrote longer histories. It was a time of beauty, stone cities rising from green forests like dreams set in limestone. A golden age, a peaceful glow, a moment in time when the Maya stood as one of the most advanced civilizations on Earth. And just like that, the classic period flourished. For centuries, the Maya world thrived, filled with color, sound, movement, knowledge, and spiritual purpose. But as every golden age eventually discovers, light does not stay forever. In the next chapter, we'll step into the shadows behind the greatness, the rivalries, ambitions, and political storms that shaped the Maya world's destiny. If you look at the Maya world from far away, it seems peaceful. Green jungle, soft wind, birds doing their bird stuff, and great stone cities rising quietly above the trees. But under that peaceful surface, oh, it was a whole political drama. Not loud, not chaotic, but definitely dramatic. Dozens of kingdoms, each with their own kings, queens, nobles, and ambitions. It was like a very ancient version of who gets the biggest slice of the cake. Except the cake was land, prestige, and power. And among all these kingdoms, two names stood above the rest: Tikal and Calakmul. People today call them the superpowers of the jungle, because honestly, that's exactly what they were. So tonight, we're going to wander slowly through their story. Not in a stressful war, documentary way, but in a soft, sleepy, let's look at the drama from a hammock kind of way. Tikal and Calakmul were not neighbors. They sat far apart, separated by thick forests, rivers, and more trees than your brain can imagine. But even from a distance, they kept an eye on each other. One temple gets taller. The other kingdom goes, "Oh really? Watch this," and builds an even taller one. It was a power competition, but very stylish. Tikal was old, proud, and powerful. Calakmul was clever, strategic, and extremely good at making friends. Well, alliances. Imagine two giant chess players, except the chess pieces are actual cities with real people living inside. And almost every kingdom in the region ended up choosing a side, whether they liked it or not. Now, in our modern world, alliances usually involve treaties and handshakes. In the Maya world, Alliances looked more like marriages, gift-giving and saying, "Hey, can you support me if my enemies decide to be annoying?" Kings would send daughters to marry into other royal families, not for romance, mostly to say, "We're family now, so don't attack me." It was polite and political at the same time. But of course, politics brings drama. Sometimes a kingdom switched sides, which in Maya terms was basically a betrayal with embroidery. A city might smile at Tikal one year, send fancy pottery as gifts, and then suddenly join Team Calakmul the next year.
Imagine being Tikal, hey! I thought we were cool!
But that's politics. Even ancient politics had plot twists. Calakmul was especially good at building a huge network of friendly cities. If alliances were like social media followers, Calakmul definitely had the bigger account. They created what historians call the Calakmul supernetwork, which sounds like an ancient Wi-Fi name, but really just means they had a lot of loyal allies. Tikal, on the other hand, had deep history, strong rulers, and a reputation that stretched across hundreds of miles. Their kings had fancy names, powerful ancestors, and temples that tried their best to scrape the sky. So naturally, these two great powers were destined to bump into each other. The rivalry between Tikal and Calakmul didn't explode in a single moment. It grew slowly, like vines climbing a wall, and just like vines, it wrapped around everything: trade routes, smaller cities, royal families, and even the stories carved into stone monuments. Every few decades, something stirred the pot. A new king rose in Tikal and wanted to prove himself. A bold ruler took Calakmul's throne and said, "Let's expand our influence, shall we?" And then the balancing act began. While the Maya world looks peaceful in pictures today, back then, kings were constantly thinking, "Who is my friend? Who might attack me? Which city should I support to weaken my rival?" Honestly, it was like a very ancient chessboard, with everyone making careful moves. And the biggest moves came from Tikal and Calakmul. Now, before you imagine giant battles with huge armies, take a deep breath. Maya warfare was not about massive destruction. It was much more precise, almost polite in a strange way. Their main goal wasn't to kill lots of enemies. It was to capture important people, especially nobles. A captured noble was like a royal-level trophy. You could use them for negotiations, alliances, or political pressure. Imagine being a Maya noble going into battle. You're wearing beautiful feathers, fancy armor, and holding weapons that look impressive. And you definitely don't want to get captured, because being captured meant you might appear on a monument later with the caption, "Unfortunately defeated." Not great for the royal Same. Wars also had a symbolic, ritual side. A king leading a battle wasn't just showing bravery, he was showing that he had divine approval, that the gods were behind him, or at least he hoped they were. Still, battles could be dangerous. Cities could suffer, and losing a war could tilt the whole political map. Which brings us back to the two superpowers. Their rivalry wasn't one big war, it was a long dance of victories, defeats, and shifting alliances. Sometimes Tikal rose to power and Calakmul had to step back. Sometimes Calakmul built a powerful alliance network and weakened Tikal. There were surprise attacks, symbolic victories, and moments when smaller kingdoms got dragged into the drama. One famous moment came when Calakmul supported a rival dynasty to challenge Tikal's kings. This weakened Tikal for decades. The city that once dominated the region suddenly struggled to keep influence. It was like the jungle's balance had shifted, but Tikal eventually recovered. A strong king rose, rebuilt the city, won major battles, and reminded the region that Tikal was still a force to be reckoned with. And through all of this, the Maya world watched quietly, city by city, carving new stories into stone as the two superpowers shaped history. While we often think of war as chaos, Maya warfare and rivalry created something else: innovation and cultural growth. Big cities built more temples to show power. Scribes wrote more history to celebrate their kings. Artists created stunning carvings that still survive today, telling stories of victories, defeats, alliances, and sacred rituals. But ambition came with a cost. Cities rose and fell. People lived under kings who worried constantly about rivals, and the balance of the region could shift in an instant, changing the fate of thousands. Yet even with all this tension, the Maya world kept its rhythm. Its astronomy, its art, its farming, its stories. Power moved like the wind through the trees, always shifting, never still. And so, as we close this chapter, imagine the night settling over the Maya world, the forest humming softly, the great cities standing tall above the trees, and somewhere out there, two rival kings planning their next move. But not tonight. Tonight, everything is calm. Just the quiet breathing of the jungle and the long, gentle story of the Maya superpowers resting under the stars. If you wandered into a Maya city long ago, don't worry, we're doing it gently. You would feel something special in the air, not noise, not chaos, but a quiet rhythm, a kind of steady heartbeat that came from the way the Maya lived, watched the skies, made art, and followed time itself. This chapter is like a slow walk through their world, a peaceful one, a nighttime stroll where you just look around, breathe, and learn without stressing your brain. So, let's wander. The Maya loved looking at the sky, but not in a casual, nice stars tonight kind of way. They watched the heavens with deep focus, like your friend who stares at their phone, but somehow notices every update ever. They studied Venus with crazy precision. They tracked its rise and fall, its bright moments, its disappearances. They knew the moon's cycles like the back of their hand, and the sun. They could tell its position at any point of the year, down to the day. If you asked a Maya astronomer, when will the next solstice happen? They wouldn't look up at the sky. They'd just say, oh, in 112 days, 3 fingers of daylight and a calm breeze. Okay, maybe not the breeze part, but their accuracy was no joke, and all this watching wasn't just for fun. For them, the sky told stories. It gave warnings. It marked seasons. It guided rituals. It was like a giant cosmic calendar hanging above everything. Now, a quick and gentle math moment. Don't worry, you can relax. The Maya used something called the vigesimal system, a base 20 number system. Why 20? Because they counted fingers and toes. Practical, cute, effective. And here's the big thing: they understood zero. Long before many other cultures, they drew it as a little shell shape. Simple, clean, and honestly kind of adorable. With this math, they did huge calculations. They predicted eclipses. They tracked cycles that lasted thousands of years, all without calculators. Just clever thinking, steady hands, and very patient counting. Even though today we mostly see Maya ruins in quiet stone grey, their world was once full of colour, bright blues, deep reds, warm yellows, soft greens. They painted murals full of life, people dancing, kings performing rituals, scenes of daily life, and even beautiful patterns that seem hypnotic when you look at them too long. Their textiles were vibrant, woven with patterns that told stories. Women spent hours spinning cotton, turning it into clothing that was both useful and gorgeous. Imagine waking up every morning, wrapping yourself in a blanket that took weeks to make. Cozy and historical, they crafted jade masks with smooth, polished surfaces that looked almost alive. Cool green faces created for ceremonies, burials, and powerful rituals. And their painted pottery. That was like their version of Instagram. Bold scenes, fancy lines, little captions carved or painted in glyphs. Each piece told a story, and each story was important enough to survive hundreds of years in the soil. The Maya didn't just build buildings. They built statements, cities that rose from the jungle like giant staircases to the sky. One of their signature features was the corbelled arch, an arch that isn't really an arch, just stones leaning toward each other until they meet. Simple, but somehow it works, like stacking books on both sides until the top ones kiss. Their pyramid temples weren't random either. They were aligned with solstices, equinoxes, and specific star positions. On certain days, shadows would slide down the stone steps in ways that looked like moving serpents. Imagine living in a city where the buildings literally perform light shows based on cosmic timing. No electricity, just pure design brilliance. Now, let's talk about the Maya ball game, one of the most iconic parts of their culture. It wasn't just a sport, it was sacred, symbolic, serious. Players hit a heavy rubber ball using their hips, elbows, and knees, never their hands. And no, this wasn't a friendly backyard game. This was ritual. This was cosmic storytelling. Some say the game represented the movement of the sun and moon. Others say it was a battle between life and death. Either way, it wasn't just entertainment. It was meaning in motion. Picture two teams under the sun, the thump of the ball echoing through a stone court. Spectators watching quietly, because they know this is not a simple match. It's a story being played out. A story everyone understood. So now let's take a soft walk through a typical day among the Maya. Nothing rushed. Just a quiet bedtime-style tour. The sun rises. Soft light glows over the thatched roofs of homes. Women start cooking maize, grinding it on stone tools. The smell of fresh tortillas fills the air. Roosters sound way too excited for this hour. Children run around. Men head to fields to check their crops, mostly maize, beans, squash, and chili. Farming wasn't easy. The jungle soil wasn't perfect. But the Maya knew how to work with the land, not against it. The city grows busier. Scribes carve glyphs. Artisans paint pottery. Merchants travel through plazas carrying baskets of salt, cacao, obsidian, cotton, and more. It's a calm kind of busy, focused, steady, rhythmic. In bigger cities, nobles meet in palace courtyards. Priests observe the sun's angle or study codices filled with astronomy and numbers. You'd hear the soft sound of weaving, the tap of stone tools, the murmur of people talking, the distant call of birds. Shadows grow long. Cooking fires glow warmly. Families gather around simple meals, maize, vegetables, maybe some cacao if it was a special day. The city slows, the sky darkens, and the stars begin to appear, the same stars Maya astronomers watched so closely. Villages get quiet. People tell stories. Children fall asleep under woven blankets. Adults rest, listening to the hum of insects and the soft breathing of the night. And somewhere far above, Venus shines like a tiny lantern, the same way it did thousands of years ago. The Maya lived with time, not against it. Their days followed the sun, their months followed the moon, their years followed the stars. Life wasn't rushed. It was steady, measured, connected to nature, family, and tradition. And as night settled over a Maya city, the world didn't feel chaotic, it felt balanced. Grounded, full of meaning. The rhythm of time continued, soft, ancient, and peaceful. Every great story has a turning point. A moment where things start to wobble. Not crash, just wobble. And for the Maya, this wobble began quietly. Like a small crack in a cup you don't notice until water starts dripping onto your lap. Nothing exploded. Nothing collapsed overnight. Instead, the decline of the Maya came slowly, softly, almost politely. A fading, not a fall. A long exhale instead of a sudden ending. So in this chapter, we move gently into that part of the story. The part where the Maya world begins to strain under its own weight. Take a deep breath. We'll walk through it calmly. For thousands of years, the Maya lived in thick jungles where everything felt alive. Birds shouting from treetops. Monkeys swinging like acrobats. Leaves as big as blankets. But as cities grew bigger and bigger, something began to change. The trees started to disappear. Why? Because the Maya needed lime plaster, a lot of it. And to make it, they had to burn limestone at very high temperatures. That meant fire, and fire meant wood, and wood meant trees. So imagine a massive city like Tikal, with its tall temples covered in white plaster that shined in the sun. Pretty, yes, but each layer of plaster had a cost paid by the forest. At the same time, more people meant more farmland. More farmland meant more clearing. And the jungle, tough as it was, started to look a little less wild around the edges. Not empty, just thinner. Like hair that is still there, but definitely not as fluffy as before. As the classic period went on, the population kept growing. Cities got crowded, villages got packed. Everyone needed to eat. The Maya were brilliant farmers. They grew maize, squash, beans, chili, cacao. They built terraces. They used clever methods to keep soil healthy. But even brilliant farmers can struggle when there are simply too many mouths and not enough land. And as forests thinned, the soil became fragile. It washed away easier. It dried out faster. Some fields stopped producing the way they used to. Imagine being a Maya farmer and watching your harvest shrink while your family grows. Stressful, yes. Even in our calm bedtime tone, we can admit it was a tough time. People probably tried everything. New fields, new methods, new prayers to the gods. But the strain kept growing. Here comes one of the biggest problems of all. Long dry periods. Modern climate studies show that the Maya suffered through severe droughts. Not just one, but several, spaced over many years. Rain became unpredictable. Rivers shrank. Reservoirs dried. Cenotes dropped lower and lower. Imagine living in a world where you depend on the seasons to survive, and suddenly the seasons start acting weird. Like a friend who always texts back instantly, and then one day leaves you on scene. for 2 months. That's how it felt. Nature, the old partner of Maya life, started missing her appointments. Priests must have felt the pressure too. People looked to them for answers. What did the gods say? When will the rain return? And the priests probably stood there like, we're working on it. The sky remained dry anyway. As if droughts and forest loss weren't enough, the political side of Maya life was also getting messy. Remember how the Maya world wasn't one empire, but many city-states? Well, each city-state had its own royal family, its own nobles, its own ambitions, its own drama, and over time, there were, let's just say, too many kings. Too many people who wanted power. Too many royal families trying to outdo each other. Some kings married into other kingdoms for alliances. Some betrayed those alliances. Some used war to gain status. Some used war just because the neighboring king annoyed them. It became a political jungle inside an actual jungle. And when political tension rises, cooperation drops. Unity fades. Everyone looks out for themselves. This fragmentation made it harder to respond to big problems like drought or shrinking farmland. Instead of saying, let's solve this together, kingdoms were more like, I'll solve it myself, thanks. Not the best strategy during a crisis. Maya wars were not huge kill, everyone battles. They focused on capturing nobles, controlling trade routes, and gaining prestige. But when there are more wars happening more often, even small ones have big effects. Farmers get disrupted. Markets slow down. Merchants avoid dangerous areas. People move to safer places. And slowly, cities start to feel strained. A little more tense, a little less safe. Not chaotic, just tired. Trade was the lifeblood of the Maya world. Jade from one region, obsidian from another, salt from coastal towns, cacao beans traveling in packs. But as kingdoms fought more and droughts made travel harder, trade networks began to weaken. Caravans that once moved smoothly now had to navigate around enemy territory. Some routes became too dangerous. Others simply dried up literally. Imagine a city that relies on trade suddenly missing key goods, stone for tools, food from allies, materials for rituals. It doesn't collapse instantly. It just functions a little worse each year. A slow fade, a quiet dimming. This is the most haunting part of the story. Not scary, just deeply calm in a sad way. As resources shrank, as droughts hit, as wars dragged on, people began to leave. Not in panic, not running. They just packed up and moved to places with more water, more food, more opportunity. A little here, a little there. Families quietly going somewhere else. Over time, big cities like Tikal, and Calakmul began to feel emptier. Temples still stood tall, plazas still stretched wide, but fewer feet walked across them. Imagine walking through a grand plaza built for thousands, but hearing only the wind and the birds. Peaceful, but in a lonely kind of way. No fire, no destruction. Just people slowly stepping away from the center of their world. The Maya didn't vanish. They didn't go extinct. Their descendants are still here today, keeping traditions alive. But the great classic cities, those shining, towering marvels, slowly faded, not because of one cause, but many, all tangled together. Environmental strain, population pressure, drought, political fragmentation, trade breakdown, all of them forming a slow unwinding. By the time the classic period ended, the jungle was already reclaiming the cities. roots pushing between stones, vines hugging walls, nature taking her place again. When people hear the phrase, the Maya collapse, they picture something dramatic. Cities falling in a single day, kings running around in panic, temples cracking in half. But the truth is far quieter, much slower. Almost like someone slowly dimming the lights in a giant room until one day you blink and realize everything is a lot darker than before. In this chapter, we walk gently through that slow fading. It's not a tragedy shouted from mountaintops. It's a long, soft goodbye from a civilization that had shined for over 1,000 years. So settle in. We're going to walk through the jungle of time, where the cities stand tall but the people begin to slip away. Between 800 and 900 CE, something strange started to happen across the southern Maya lowlands. Cities that had been alive and powerful for centuries began to lose their spark. Tikal, once a superpower of the jungle, slowly quieted down. Copan, famous for its beautiful carvings and skilled artisans, saw its plazas grow emptier. Palenque, the city of elegant temples and wise kings, stopped attracting crowds, not in one day, not in 1 year, but slowly. Like a festival ending and everyone heading home one by one, the sound of the market softened. The laughter of children in courtyards grew rare, workshops fell silent, and the streets that once echoed with footsteps turned into quiet paths of dust and fallen leaves. This was the beginning of the classic Maya's final chapter. One of the most haunting signs of the decline is the unfinished buildings. Temples half-built, stairs that lead nowhere, walls without their final plaster, carvings that suddenly stop mid-line, like the sculptor took a lunch break and just never came back. You can almost imagine a worker looking up at the sky, seeing storm clouds, thinking, "I'll finish this tomorrow," and then, tomorrow, never truly arriving. These unfinished monuments tell us something important. People were leaving faster than cities could keep up. For centuries, Maya rulers carved their victories, histories, and rituals onto tall stone monuments called stela. These carvings are like ancient Instagram posts, updates, announcements, celebrations. But around the time of the collapse, these monuments stop appearing. No more new stories carved into stone. No more dates. No more royal achievements. The silence in the inscriptions is almost louder than anything else. It's like the cities themselves stopped speaking. Remember earlier chapters, when Maya wars were more like elite competitions. Capture the noble, win the prestige, go home. Well, during the collapse, the wars were not so elegant. As water became scarce, crops failed, and people moved away, kingdoms tried to hold on to whatever they had left. And that meant more conflict, more ambushes, more raids, more desperation. Kings struggled to claim authority. Without food, without resources, and without support, royal power began to crack. And when kings lose power, cities lose direction. You can almost hear some farmers whispering, "I love this king, but he cannot make it rain," and quietly deciding to move somewhere safer. This may be the most important part of the collapse. It wasn't caused by kings falling. It wasn't caused by temples cracking. It wasn't even caused by cities fighting. The collapse happened because the farmers left. They were the backbone of Maya society. They grew the food. They built the houses. They carried the kingdom on their shoulders. And when they realized the land couldn't sustain them anymore, when droughts killed their crops, when wars made fields unsafe, they made the most practical choice. They walked away. Not angrily, not dramatically, just quietly. They packed their tools. They took their families. And they headed toward places with more water, more fertile soil, and more hope. Once the farmers left, everything else followed. Like removing the foundation from a house, slow, inevitable sinking. Scholars have many theories about why the classic Maya cities declined. Let's walk through them softly, like choosing snacks from a shelf. Drought. We already talked about the severe dry periods. When rains failed, crops failed. When crops failed, cities starved. Warfare. More wars made farming risky and broke trade routes. Cities got cut off from vital goods. Crop failures. Over-farming. Soil exhaustion. Droughts. The land simply couldn't keep up. Disease. Some propose that illnesses might have spread through crowded cities. Political overreach. Too many kings, too many rivals, too many demands on the people. When you add all of these together, you get a slow but powerful decline, like a heavy weight pressing down until the system can't carry it anymore. Here's the key thing: the collapse wasn't sudden. It wasn't a dramatic explosion of civilization. It was a quiet, century-long fade. From about 800 to 900 CE, cities emptied bit by bit. Families left. Fields were abandoned. Temples went quiet. Monuments stayed unfinished. The jungle began creeping back, leaf by leaf. Imagine walking through a great Maya plaza at the beginning of the collapse. You'd see fewer people each season. Less trade, less ceremony, more silence. And year after year, the city would feel lighter, but also emptier. Like a party where the music is still playing, but most guests have already slipped out the door. Here's something many people misunderstand. The Maya didn't vanish. Their culture didn't die. Their people didn't disappear. While the great southern cities declined, the northern Maya continued to grow. Chichen Itza, in the Yucatan Peninsula, became powerful and vibrant long after cities like Tikal were mostly abandoned. New styles appeared. New architecture, new trade networks, new political systems. It wasn't a collapse of a whole civilization. It was a shift. A movement from the old centers to new ones. A change in direction. Like a river changing course. Still flowing, still alive, just moving somewhere else. Eventually, the trees returned. Roots wrapped around old temples. Birds nested in crevices where kings once stood. Vines climbed the walls of empty palaces. The jungle, patient and ancient, reclaimed the stone. But even as the cities faded under leaves and moss, the Maya people lived on. Their languages survived. Their traditions survived. Their spirits survived. And their abandoned cities, hidden for centuries, waited quietly for someone to find them again. So here we are, the final chapter of our quiet journey through the world of the Maya. And in this chapter, we gently clear up one of the biggest myths floating around like a confused mosquito in the jungle. The Maya did not disappear. No, they didn't vanish into thin air, or step into some cosmic portal, or leave a dramatic goodbye note carved onto a stone tablet. They simply changed, adapted, moved, and kept living, just like humans always do. Tonight, let's take a peaceful walk through the Maya world after the great collapse and meet the people who carry that long history in their hearts even today. If you visited Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, Honduras, or El Salvador today, you might hear something magical in the markets or the villages. Soft conversations flowing in Quiche, Yucatec Maya, Mam Tzotzil, Kol, more than 30 Maya languages still spoken by millions of people. That's right, millions. So the next time someone says, "The Maya civilization vanished," you can gently correct them while sipping your hot cocoa and feeling wise. Because the cities may have quieted down, but the people did not fade. Their culture simply shifted from giant cities to smaller villages and mountain towns, where traditions could survive in peace, like candles burning low but steady. Let's peek into some of these traditions. But quietly, we're in bedtime mode. A Maya woman sits by her backstrap loom. The loom is tied around her waist and anchored to a post or a tree. And with every pull of the thread, she repeats designs that go back hundreds, sometimes thousands of years. Bright reds, deep blues, soft greens. Each pattern carries a story. Some patterns talk about corn, some about the sky gods, some about the ancestors. You won't see these designs in your average clothing store. This is art mixed with memory. You remember the Maya and their zero, right? That lovely shell symbol that made them mathematical rock stars. Well, that knowledge didn't vanish either. Maya communities still use day, counting traditions, ritual calendars, and cycles that come from the same mathematical mindset. Time to the Maya is not just numbers. It's a rhythm, a heartbeat. In some towns today, you can still find Maya priests, sometimes called Ajacuj or H-men, lighting incense, offering prayers, and guiding people through spiritual ceremonies. The smell of copal resin rises into the air, just like it did in the ancient temples. It's peaceful, respectful, and deeply rooted in the old world. Around the early 1500s, Spanish ships appeared on the horizon. And, well, history got loud for a while. The Spanish pushed hard. New rulers, new systems, new religions. Many Maya books were burned, towns were taken, and people were forced into a world they didn't choose. It's not a fun chapter, but we won't go too deep into the drama tonight. This is a bedtime story after all. But here's the quiet miracle: the Maya survived it. They hid their old knowledge inside new traditions. They spoke their languages at home. They kept weaving, planting corn, telling stories, following rituals. Some traditions mixed with Spanish ones, but the roots stayed strong, like trees that lived through many storms. Now fast forward to today. Something beautiful is happening. Across Central America, many Maya people are reconnecting with their ancient identity with new strength. Schools teach Maya languages. Cultural centers revive old dances and ceremonies. Young Maya artists mix ancient designs with modern fashion. Historians and archaeologists, many of them Maya themselves, explore ancestral cities with pride. It's like the civilization took a long breath, and now it's exhaling, slowly and brightly. Even the temples and cities you see in documentaries, Tikal, Palenque, Copan, Chichen Itza, are studied, preserved, and admired not as ruins of a lost people, but as the heritage of living communities. Every year, researchers discover something new. Maybe it's a hidden temple that the forest kept secret for centuries. Maybe a painted mural under a layer of old plaster. Maybe a jade carving with the gentle face of a long-ago king. And each discovery tells us more about how the Maya lived, dreamed, ruled, laughed, and survived. Technology like LiDAR, laser scanning from the air, has revealed thousands of previously unknown structures hidden under the jungle canopy. Entire cities, roads, farming terraces. It turns out the Maya world was even bigger and more connected than we thought. So their story keeps expanding even now. And now, as we come to the end of this sleepy chapter, here's a soft thought to rest on. Civilizations don't really die. They change shape. They shift. They leave behind languages, stories, art, mountains of knowledge, and people who carry the spark forward. The Maya built some of the world's greatest cities. They tracked the planets with insane accuracy. They created math that still blows minds. They painted, carved, wrote, prayed, calculated, and dreamed. And even when their great cities emptied, the people themselves kept walking their path, step by step. Today, a Maya child might learn math using the same base, 20 patterns her ancestors used. A farmer might plant corn the same way his great-great-great-grandparents did. A grandmother might tell stories about heroes, gods, and talking animals that go all the way back to the ancient days. The civilization may have changed, but it never truly fell. It simply flowed into new forms, like a river finding a new course through the forest.